All right. Well, welcome to our second SEL virtual book club. So, tonight we're going to discuss Choose Wonder Over Worry, Move Beyond Fear and Doubt to Unlock Your Full Potential by Amber Rae. Amber Rae is awesome. I actually found her on Instagram at least a year ago. Her Instagram handle is at Hey, it's Amber Rae or Hey Amber Rae. I'll put it in the chat. But she posts a lot of like small snippets of self care, managing stress, a lot of stuff like that. So she has a really interesting internet presence. She's an entrepreneur, she's run several businesses, she does a lot of different things. But that's how I kind of found out about her and about this book, which was also recommended by Priya Singhvi, who's one of our mentors for Lausanne Learning. So that's kind of how we discovered this book. And I think that it's really interesting to me how much she shares of like her personal story. I think that that's part of like why this book is good, but also part of like how you kind of believe like what she's selling you is that she's sharing her personal story and she's saying like it's okay to fail, it's okay to be afraid of things. Here's my story. It's got a lot of ups and a lot of downs. See, I've done it. So, I really enjoyed this book. I think that it's not only is it kind of a quick read, but it's also just a really good example of how like self-help books don't have to be awful. Um, because there's a lot of journaling in here. There's a lot of, you know, this is kind of what I did, this is the inactivity. It's not just like, let me tell you how to do things. So I thought that it was really good. AB, what did you think about the book?
Well, considering it took me a day to read, it was pretty awesome for me. I'm not an excellent reader anyway, and it's really hard for me to really get into books. And this one I finished in a day. Um, so the easy read part was amazing, and I also found that it was kind of speaking to the things that I really needed to focus on for myself.
Mhm.
Um, and I felt like each chapter kind of motivated me to read the next. So it was a really easy read for me, which is saying a lot.
Yeah, and I like too that like when you go into it, like on the first page, she tells you like this is not just like me telling you stories, it's a journey. So I think that the structure of the book, it's broken up into part one, the two voices, part two, the worry myths, and then part three, the union. Like it's on like the very first page. So I
Yes.
think that I know like as a grad student, I always read the introduction first because like well, I read the whole book, but I think that this introduction made me want to read the whole book more than if she had just started off with like a story. I like that she gives you an idea of where to go. And I get sucked into books really easily, but I found myself even more kind of sucked into this because it was such easily like digestible chapters too. Like the activities really break up the just kind of like story that she's telling.
Absolutely. I
So,
liked the journal aspect of it. I did not partake in the journal aspect of it the first time I read it. And
mhm.
I'm still kind of going through it again and really being intentional about filling that part out. And she does have on her website a journal that accompanies the book as well. And it looks really interesting. Um, and part of the thing about this book that really spoke to me is don't die with your gift still inside, which is a major part of the first part of the book. And I'm just sitting there because we all have imposter syndrome. I know you do, and I do too. And we're in this rat race of our lives, especially during a pandemic. And it's easy to forget ourselves and who we are.
Mhm.
And I think those journaling opportunities give us an opportunity to kind of reflect inward, instead of reflecting on the things that we aren't doing right, reflect on the things that are going right in our lives, and just be kind of internal about our thoughts.
Yeah, I think not only like looking internally, like at what our thoughts look like, but also taking those and then intentionally saying, wait, I can do this. I actually thought it was really powerful. Like that, of course, is the big thing that she says is don't die with your gifts inside you. Like you have all this potential, like let it out. And I'm one of those people who I'm a little cynical. And when I first read that, I was like, yeah, that's easy for you to say. Like you probably like have money and this cushy job and but she tells a lot of stories of like failure where it's not like I stopped drinking Starbucks for a week and I had the money to start a Fortune 500 company. Like it's very realistic, right? So it's, I think that we're all scared of failure on the surface because we're like, what if I lose money or what if I lose my job or, these like practical considerations. But I think for me, it was that intentionality of looking below those things and saying, like, what you're really afraid of is failure. What you're really afraid of is worry. She talks a lot about how this book almost didn't get written. And she says, you're not good and your inner critic says you're not good enough to do this. Hasn't this already been done? All these things. And I think that we all speak to ourselves like that. And so to me, like, even though I couldn't relate to like at one point in the book, she like hates her job in San Francisco and she's like, I just want to live in New York City. Like, I can't relate to the ability to do that, but I can relate to the ability to say, like, your inner critic is doing too much. Like, they're saying too much right now. So I thought that that was a really great part of the book that it's kind of for everyone.
It is, and she talks a lot about rejection and defeat and how it feels to fail, and then kind of pushing through that and challenging yourself to use failure as an opportunity to do something different and something that you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I liked too the if success or failure or money or anything didn't matter, what would you do? Because
Right.
that's a great like mental exercise to say, okay, well, yeah, of course that stuff does matter, but like, let's start with like my dream and let's work backwards to see if I can get there. What that really says about, like you said, like your gifts too. Like, what does your dream say about who you are inside?
Yeah. Then
Um,
how does it make you feel when you like journal about those or when you think
mhm.
about those things that are really your dreams? How does it make you feel? And how might we bridge the gap to get that feeling all the time instead of, oh well, if I had $1 million, I would be able to do this, or if I had time, I would be able to write this book, or
Mhm.
whatever that is like there's something keeping you from doing the things that you want to do inside, and how can we push past that, and what is it really about?
Yeah. Well, and I think too, so we one of the discussion questions that Amy put together was um there's a journal entry on page 78 that talks about like not knowing what you want. So to me, that's like really scary. Like it's really scary to not be like, this is what I'm going to do because I'm a planner. But I think though that that kind of opens it up to like, what are you curious about? Are you betraying yourself doing what you're doing? How can you turn these challenges into a learning opportunity? And I think that that's so crucial, especially right now in the pandemic, because like none of us are doing what we want to do. Like, we're not going to the movies, we're not going to see our families. If you're teaching, I almost can guarantee you're not doing exactly what you want to do every day.
And
But
hugs are contraband.
right, yeah, we
That's my
can't
big
even
thing.
like
I'm a
hug.
hugger.
Yeah. So, if you know that you don't like what you're doing right now, that's powerful. But not knowing what you want and journaling and thinking about and mapping out like what you want, not just what you want to do for a career, but like what you want. I don't know, I think is really powerful. And I think, Amy, you can probably relate to this too. I think that as women and as mothers and as people who, are kind of self sacrificing a lot, and if you're in education, like you are, we don't ask ourselves what we want very often. We ask ourselves what we have to do and what we need to do, but not what we want. And I think that that was really powerful for me, because she also talks about you can't do it all. So if you see, oh, I want to do X, well, you can't commit to all these other things if they keep you from doing that. She gives the example of like, I want to speak and do a journal and do a podcast and do art murals, but I want this book even more. And
Saying
that's
no,
really powerful.
saying no, is really hard for me. You know, Amber.
See, and
Uh,
I don't have as much trouble saying no to external things as I do internal things.
yeah,
So yeah, which I think both are struggles. Yeah.
yeah, it's hard. It's hard for me to say no, especially when someone needs my help with something that maybe I'm more advanced at a level of. We're talking technology here, um, so it's really hard for me to say no. It's really hard for me to see the bigger picture and say, "Oh, well, if I do X, then this is gonna help everybody in this area." It's hard for me to say no to things like that because I don't like to see people around me fail either.
Hmm.
So I think this really opened my eyes to, you know what? I have one plate. I don't have two. I don't have 12. I need to focus on this one plate, fill it up with the things that I want and I know that I need to do in my realm of my world, and the external things that want to keep piling on that plate or adding to that plate, I have to say no sometimes.
Yeah.
Delegate.
Well, and I think too that there is that idea of if we delegate, it's seen as laziness,
We're
but it's
helping
not,
others grow.
right? We're giving them growth opportunities.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that the cool thing on here, so there's the journaling about don't know what you want yet, like try some questions. But then on the next page, she has like a graph of like, I want more. So I choose this and this will stop. Um, and that's not, I think that she's not saying like, don't have fun and don't do things that you enjoy to get to that goal. Cause that's like self care and mental health. But if you're saying yes to every opportunity, you're probably not being true to yourself, but you're also every yes takes away and makes another no. Because, like you said, we only have one plate. So you don't have the capacity to do everything, even when you're asked to do everything. And I think that's a thing that we're probably all facing right now, as educators and as people in general, is we're being asked to do everything and we can't. So I thought that that was really powerful to talk about.
Like, there have been bright spots though, in this year. It's been one of the craziest years, and that's an understatement, right?
Yeah.
So we've got to find those bright spots that have happened. And on page 102, um, she kind of has a journal entry on there to say, like, chart your top 10 moments of this year. Um, and it could be professional, it could be personal, it could be maybe you during the lockdown you built a better relationship with your children, or you found out things about your students while you're working remotely that you didn't know before, and it brought you closer together, or or maybe you learned a new tech tool and you're not as, you know, you're more tech savvy than you actually thought you were in the beginning. So I think there are bright spots, and I think if we really focus on those bright spots that have happened, that the negative things aren't as prevalent in our lives, and we don't focus on them as much.
Yeah, and I think that focusing on those bright spots is like so not the same thing as toxic positivity.
Yes.
It's not like you can do it and everything is great. Like everything is not great. Like, but there are bright spots. Like, for example, like my daughter is really thriving in online learning. And I know that that's not the same for everyone, but that's a really big bright spot for me. Um, we got a lot of house projects done. Like, I think that we even got to see how powerful it can be to focus, like for Lausanne Learning, to focus our attentions on providing professional development rather than providing events. Like, I think that that was a really good pivot for us that really spoke to our mission. And it probably wouldn't have happened in the same way without some of these less bright spots. So yeah, I think that she definitely like does not think toxic positivity is okay, but I think the idea of like listing these are the top 10 moments for me. I actually talked to someone else earlier today about how powerful it is when the conversation was about social media, but when we take a break from social media, we move away from seeing everyone's highlight reels because I don't have like a problem with social media necessarily, but I think that one of the big issues for kids, for us, for everyone is we see every second of our lives. And so we see the imposter syndrome and the doubt and the worry, and we don't see anybody else's. And so it looks like everybody else's lives are perfect,
Right.
and they're not. So,
So
yeah, and
true.
I think that that goes back to imposter syndrome, you know? She talks a lot about I love the note that she writes to herself.
Yes.
It's on page 134, but it's who the hell am I to write a book? Like, who hasn't thought that before? Even if it's not about writing a book, like, who am I to do this?
Yeah, exactly. It goes through our minds all the time. And especially like you said with social media and seeing everybody's like perfect, they only post what the perfect pictures and the perfect things that happen, and that's not real life. That's not accurate. That's you don't see the failure that it took to get to that point. You don't see the mistakes that were made. You don't see their self-doubt and their, negativity. You only see the positive things. And it's, it can be very damaging to your self-talk.
Yeah. To that, like, inner critic that you
Yeah.
have that doesn't it's never like an inner cheerleader, right? It's like an inner critic instead. And so, yeah, I think that that idea that she brings up of like, I'm not a fake. Like, I'm not just faking this. I'm not just like and then she also, this is one of the discussion questions, but she talks a lot about like if criticism and judgment didn't matter, what would you do? And I think that like we would do so much more if we weren't worried about being criticized or judged. I know, like, I'll just share a personal story that this made me think of. When I was in high school, probably ninth, 10th grade, somewhere around there, I was in choir and I had this big solo and I loved to sing. And fun fact about me, I was in an all women's barbershop chorus, so that I had to audition for. So I know I was at least somewhat not tone deaf. Um, but I had this big solo, and this boy that I liked came up to me after our performance, and he was like, you're a little flat. And like that was at
Oh,
least like 20 years ago, like at least. And I still like can visual like I don't remember what I ate for breakfast this morning, but I still can like visualize that scene happening. And I quit choir the next year. And I don't think it was conscientiously like, oh, this guy was mean to me and like I don't think that that was it, but it just made me feel like so defeated and criticized that I didn't even want to do it anymore.
right. And how many things have we either quit or not tried because of that criticism?
Oh, a
And
ton.
so much, so
Yeah.
much. And where would we be if we hadn't listened to the judgment and the criticism from others? And that's something that we can instill in our students as well, is that not toxic positivity, of course, but just the inner, the self-talk and that inner critic, and um, the judgment of others, and focusing on a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset, and giving them opportunities to fail in a safe environment, um,
Mhm.
and learn how to do that. Because I remember when I was in high school, like I didn't have that opportunity to really fail. I mean, I played basketball and quit because of that same the criticism and judgment of others. Also, my negative self image of myself. But
Mhm.
like, I made great grades all throughout high school, and then when I got to college and I, failed for the first time, I didn't know what to do. Giving students that opportunity, especially at a very young age, to develop that growth mindset through failure is a wonderful experience, and it's part of the
Mhm.
reason why I really wanted to start a business in my math classrooms a couple of years ago, is because that giving them the opportunity to, okay, well, you have to come up with the idea for a business, you have to prototype it, you have to do market research, and then put it out there and see what sticks. And when they all developed their ideas and presented them, and their first idea didn't work, they were like, "Oh, well, we could quit. We're good." And I wouldn't let them quit. So
Right.
I think giving them that opportunity really was a game changer for those kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, a lot of schools and a lot of people say, "Oh, this is a safe space for failure." And then when students fail, and I'm not just talking about like make a bad grade, like when students like don't get it right on the first try, the immediate reaction is you got a bad grade. Um and so I think that like while bad grades like in middle school don't matter as much as like they do later in your life, like getting a bad that's still a consequence. So it's not like a safe space to fail because if you assign a grade to that failure, like that's making it unsafe for
Right. It's that
kids.
judgment and criticism.
Yeah, exactly. I know my daughter is at a school that claims that she's not at Lausanne. So before anybody thinks that I'm like criticizing the place I work, um their one of their like core pieces of their mission is we fail forward. Like we love to fail. And she couldn't do a makeup test when she was sick last year because I didn't send a note before, like I pulled her out. This year she has a great math teacher, for example, who like they have exit tickets and they get to take them as many times as they want to because it's a safe space to learn and to fail. It's not just like dependent on this test. And I think that that's so different from how it was when I was in school. I can't imagine there being room to fail when I was like in middle school and high school. And in college, exactly. I got there and not only did I have this kind of inner critic, but I didn't know how to fail. And the stakes were so much higher if I did. I mean, in my personal life, in my academic life, teaching our students that they have that safe space, I think is so important. And I think that if I had read a book like this or like our January pick, which is Brave, Not Perfect, if I had read something like that when I was in high school, I think I would have been braver with things. I think that I would have, you know, done a lot of things differently because it might have helped to not only silence that inner critic, but also say, what's the worst that can happen? And anyone who knows me that's watching this knows that I will always tell you the worst that could happen. like I've planned for the contingencies, but I think that that imposter syndrome and that fear of failure, like if we can give our students safe spaces to interact with that, that's really important. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And maybe they won't have that imposter syndrome as much as like I do.
right. Yeah. Well, and I think too that she brings up the point a lot of rejection and defeat are parts of success too. So, if you get defeated and you just give up, like that's not success. If you get defeated and you persevere through that defeat, like that's a better marker of success, um, than any kind of like instant success story that
Right.
is
And I
that
think
perseverance.
that also takes me back to the classroom of what does success really look like in the classroom and how
Hmm.
is it measured? And if we're really measuring growth, then that that rejection and defeat or the criticism and judgment from a bad grade shouldn't matter. That shouldn't be
Right.
the measure of success. It should be, well, here's where I was in the beginning, and here's where I am now. This is how much I've grown, and that reflection piece is so important. And I think this book really brings out the importance of self-reflection.
Yeah. Yeah, and of not just like positive self-reflection either.
Right.
I feel like sometimes when we talk to our students, we're like, reflect on how this went well. Like, we also
Yeah.
need to reflect on like how it went badly too,
Yeah.
which is uncomfortable. I
And
think,
how we reacted to it going badly.
right.
And I think it's a whole piece of maybe even like a design thinking cycle where you're going through the steps of, okay, here's what went well, here's what went wrong, here's how I reacted to it, here's what I
Mhm.
changed, here's how I'm moving forward. So reflection is not just about, okay, what went well, here's how I'm going to repeat it next time. It's looking at all aspects of the failure or success, and like really digging deep into it. And I think
Yeah.
that could be applied to every subject area as well.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the first thing that comes to mind is like, oh, like the scientific method, right? Like you try things and you fail or succeed or whatever. But I mean, so I'm a historian. I think that that could be applied to what I do too. I mean, whether you're a little kid learning about US history or you're my age still writing your dissertation, like whatever, wherever you are, you're learning constantly from what you're learning, but also how you're reacting to it. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And I loved the chapter about jealousy.
Yes.
Like because I think that we often with our partners, with our friends, with our students, we have I know I do this. Like I play out both sides of a conversation in my head and then when it doesn't go the way that I wanted it to go, I'm like, "Oh, I don't know how to react. Like I don't know how to pivot now." And she talks about this conversation with her boyfriend. I don't think that they were married at that point. So she talks about this conversation and she's like sending all these like these text messages. She's so worried, she's so jealous. And he's like, "Whoa, like this is this is not a reaction to this thing. It's a reaction to how you're feeling." And especially right now, I know like I live in a 900 square foot house. So like I'm probably not having great reactions to my family all the time. But with our students, what they're going through and what they're doing is not always what we think it is. And sometimes we have reactions that are because of our internal issues. Like I know we've talked a lot about like giving people grace this year and realizing what other people are going through. But I love this whole thing about it's not really jealousy. It's identifying what the internal voice is saying to you and how you're then projecting that to other people. Um, and she has a reflection. The last time I felt jealous was how I responded is, and the way I want to respond next time, which I feel sometimes like I should just print out daily and be like, this is how I actually responded, and this is how I want to respond. But I think that we're doing that with our students too and with ourselves and with our fellow teachers is sometimes in high stress situations because of that inner critic we're replying in ways or we're initiating conversations in ways that are not productive for sure but are not helpful to anyone. And this was a really like a non-confrontational way of like telling me that.
Yeah.
She's not confrontational in this book, and I really like that. It didn't feel like somebody was telling me what to do. So,
Right. Or making me feel bad about myself even
yeah,
more. It kind of did the opposite. It made me feel better about myself.
yeah, I agree. It's not. She talks a lot about. I love the kind of one of the not the last, but one of the last kind of journal exercises is what would it look like to put love and joy at the center of what you create and what might change. And I took that and thought it's not just like creating things like here's your scarf. Like it's also like how we create like our communities and our relationships with our students and our classrooms and our schools. Like, what if we put love and joy at the center of that
Even now in a
instead of
pandemic.
right, especially now, right? What if we took grades and standardized tests and all that kind of out of the and kids have to be I saw on Twitter the other day a school is having kids like face the camera the whole time and like if they turn around to get their charger, they're in trouble. It was this whole long story. But like, what if we took the stuff that doesn't matter out and put like joy at the center? Like, what would school look like? What would our lives look like? It would be totally different.
It totally,
Yeah.
completely different.
So, yeah, I really love all the journal entries. I actually did write in my book quite a bit. Not on the first read. I did the same thing. I kind of read through it and I was like, oh yeah, I'm here for this. And then I wrote some. I actually used Michelle Obama's guided journal, the Becoming Journal that she put out, which is awesome. But I journaled some of this too, like in some free space, and I think that she does a really good job of not being confrontational and not making you feel bad, but also saying, "Oh, like maybe I should work on that."
Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah, and so for teachers too, I feel like one of the most important chapters is about overwhelm.
Yes.
And so she talks in this chapter a lot about, I'm doing like she gives some stories of like I'm doing what I love, but I'm so overwhelmed. And I think that a lot of us feel like that right now. I know Amy and I do for sure. Um, but the point that she brings up is if something is really important to you, you'll be a little uncomfortable, but you have to say no to things that are not important to you. Like she goes back to that idea of like, you have to so she says desire becomes a contract we make with ourselves to respect the process as we move toward what we want, and part of that process is saying no to things. um so just a little food for thoughts, for educators especially, and for students too, is like school is your job, sure, like I get that mindset, but also like how do you when you're overwhelmed, how do you deal with that overwhelm? So
Absolutely. I love that you bring that up about students is that yes, you know, school is technically their job. And if we're not putting love and joy at the center of our lessons and teaching those students, especially now during the pandemic when they can't come close to each other and you can't give them a hug when they're feeling overwhelmed, how are we taking care of their overwhelm? Yes,
mhm.
we're overwhelmed 100%, but they're overwhelmed as well. And how are we taking care of their overwhelm as well? So,
Yeah.
more food for thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And then she goes into to talk about anxiety, which anxiety like springs from overwhelm. And she talks about like name it to tame it, of course, is like a well-known saying, but then she talks about like journaling, which I also find helpful. But this one, like when I read the fourth kind of tip that she did, I like immediately recoiled in horror because like it's something I'm so uncomfortable with. She says schedule time to listen to your anxieties. And I was like, "Oh no." Like that's unnecessary. We don't need to do that. But I'm just going to read this passage because I think that we can ask our students to do this and they're going to be horrified probably, but I felt it was really important. So she says, so much of our angst comes from resisting our anxiety and toxic positivity, right? Allowing ourselves to feel what's there to feel allows us to move beyond the noise. Intentionally set aside time to listen to your anxieties, to see what's beneath them by asking yourself questions like, what is out of alignment? Where am I feeling off track? What conversations am I avoiding? What feelings am I pushing away? What is asking for my attention? What is my anxiety wanting me to know? So it's like leaning in, right? Like Sheryl Sandberg's book, it's leaning into your anxiety, but not just going, "Oh, well, yep, I'm anxious." It's reflections about what am I anxious about. So like I'm anxious about a meeting tomorrow that I have because even though in this situation I'm 100% the expert, who am I to tell this person how to do this thing? So by thinking through that, though, I can say, well, here's who you are to do that. You've done this and this and this. And it gives you, and I think it can give students space to say, what are you really feeling? What are you really anxious about? Why are you anxious about that? And also, what does your anxiety want you to know? And mine for like this meeting, which is so not a big deal, is my anxiety wants me to know that like I need to be really confident and really prepared and to push that imposter syndrome away. And our students are really anxious right now, even if they love online school. This world is weird. So I think that scheduling time to listen to your anxieties like actually is horrifying to me. But when I did the exercise, it was really powerful. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. As somebody who is definitely a repressor, I think that that this book was really helpful for me. Um, because she talks about if my anxiety is a signal that something is out of alignment, what it's trying to tell me is X. And of course, like when we talk about anxiety, like we're not talking about like the actual like chemical imbalance of having like generalized anxiety disorder, or like your mental health is just as important as your physical health. Like this is not meant to treat like mental health issues, but when you feel anxious about something, your anxiety is trying to tell you something. And I think that that's really important.
Great. You are enough, Amber.
You are enough, Amy. Thank you. Yeah, and that's the big takeaway from this book, right? Is that like everyone has gifts inside. And if you're letting anxiety and loss and anger and jealousy and overwhelm, if you're letting all those things push your gifts like back inside of you, like you're doing yourself a disservice, but you're also like, think of what you could be contributing to the world too. And like we all need to think about others right now, like hashtag wear a mask. But also like we need to be thinking of others too, not at the expense of ourselves, but like if you don't let your gifts out, like you're cheating yourself and you're cheating everyone else. I thought that was really, it wasn't just, that's one of the things I really like about her book is that it's not just about cheating yourself. Because I think it's really easy to be like, well, oh well,
Yeah,
when it comes to just you. But when it's like, oh, like the world, like the world might benefit, I think that that's kind of a different story, or that's how it felt for me. So
I also like her take on selfishness and how those gifts, letting them out, isn't being selfish.
right.
And like you said, it's sharing them with the world. But I really liked her taking on selfishness and
Yeah, and that
how
it's
it's
go
good
ahead.
for you. Like you got
Yeah.
to take care of yourself.
Yeah,
Be
you can't pour
selfish.
from an empty cup. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that we take that a lot. I like that she addresses too that like letting your gifts out into the world is not selfish, but sometimes you have to be selfish to let them out. Like you can't say yes to everything. You can't be everything to everyone. You can't be perfect. You've got to take care of yourself because the least selfish thing you can do is to let your gifts out into the world. But sometimes on that journey, you have to be selfish, quote unquote, to get there. And I think that's especially for educators, I think that's a really important point because sometimes it feels selfish to take care of ourselves, but
Yes.
it's not.
Yes. I feel really bad when I don't open my computer after I get home from work,
Yeah.
or I don't, you know, plan on like all weekend to do these amazing lessons. I feel, a little selfish. Like, oh, I want to take care of me. I want to go on a walk. I want to, enjoy the fall weather. I want to build a fire in the fire pit. those things like I'm going to take care of myself and my family instead of doing something that I know I probably should do, but I'm gonna wait. That those boundaries, setting those boundaries seems so selfish, but it's something that I have definitely done this year, and I think I'm a better person for it. I think I'm more prepared now than I was last year because I'm taking more time to relax and take care of myself.
Yeah. No,
Boundaries.
I agree. Yeah, boundaries are key, and not just boundaries with other people, but like boundaries with yourself. Like, I know a lot of this book is about like you have no boundaries, but like sometimes like you have to set boundaries like for yourself, like for your anxiety, for your, for saying yes when you don't really want to, when you want to say yes to something else more. Um and that self-care aspect of it too. I always joke, I'm like, self-care isn't just like women eating salads. Like, it's not like, we've all seen the stock image of like white women eating salads. Like, that's not what self-care is necessarily. It's different for every person, but I think that it's hard to figure out what self-care is for you. So, like, self-care for me is making a to-do list at the end of the day, every day for the next day, so that I can plan room to be spontaneous. I can plan room to have fun. And I know that I'm not going to have anxiety about it the whole time I'm having fun. But it's also for me not opening my computer some days. It's also like taking a random Tuesday off to like pre-pandemic, like go to a movie by myself in blissful silence, right? Like it's those things too. And I think that as educators, it's a twofold problem because society expects everything of us. We're supposed to be kind of everything to our students, and we are constantly asked to do more and more and more and more. But then for ourselves, we've internalized that message too, that like I'm never enough and I have to work constantly. What if we just put joy back into our lives? Like, what if we made joy the center of everything we do? Because, like, I guarantee, like, half the stuff that you think is pressing, if you make joy the center of it, is not going to be as important anymore. Like, don't lose your job. Don't be like Amber told me to only think about joy. But I think that that's so important for educators. And then when you take it a step further and think about, like, man, I bet my students are struggling. I think that that's really important, like in everything we do, to kind of understand. So, so we're about at time, but I really enjoyed this book. I think that I definitely would follow her on Instagram. I'll actually look up what her Instagram is now, but I definitely would. She just gives kind of like little nuggets of things. One of the best things about social media, I think, is that God, 20 years ago, would we have even like been connected to an author? Like, she liked like our Instagram posts. Like, that wouldn't have happened. So I think that, there are some benefits to the connectivity that we have. So her Instagram is at Hey Amber Rae. So it's HeyAmberRae. And like she puts a bunch of stuff. She has a thing about reactions and the power of pause up right now. Um, Lots of things about like 5 things to tell yourself when you're feeling too much. If anybody has like election anxiety, she's got some stuff about that too. So I definitely would follow her and some of the people that she follows because I think that she does a lot of good work in little snippets that you can kind of get to. So, Amy, did you have any final words about this book? I know you really liked this one a lot.
I did really like it. You just have to understand, like, I'm not a very good reader. Like, it takes me a while to comprehend things, and I like to sit in silence, and I can't be distracted by anything outside. And I read this book in a day, and that has never happened to me.
Yeah.
So I just think that it's one of those books that it's so easy to read, and it has a lot of truth in it. and it made me feel better about myself. And it kind of just really set me in on a path of, well, I need to take care of myself a little bit more than I have been, and I need to, recognize those opportunities for me to be enough
Mhm.
and say no.
Yes, and say no to things. Yeah, no, I agree with you. So I also read this really quickly, sitting on my patio by my fire pit. It was real cozy. But I think that this is also, it's not just a quick read, but like a lot of books like this, I buy and then I never read again. Like I read it once, I'm like, oh, it was fine, but and then I don't ever read it again. This is one that I think like I'll go back to like whenever I need kind of a refresher. It's short. It's only 240-ish pages, and a lot of it's pictures and a lot of it's journal entries. So definitely recommend this book. We'll have a link to it on the website. So feel free to check it out. She does, like Amy said, have a journal too that goes with it. And of course, she's got all kinds of stuff on her website too. But we'll send out the discussion questions and all the links to everything when we send out the videos. So, thank you for watching. So, this was our discussion of Choose Wonder Over Worry for our second SEL virtual book club. We are not reading anything like technically in November. We're going to have our next session on December 2nd to get past the Thanksgiving holiday. And we're reading Lost Connections. So that's actually about social media and depression and how we aren't connecting with people in the same ways that we were. So definitely join us for that. So that's all I have. Amy, do you have any final words?
You are enough.
You are enough. Thank you, everyone.